A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Super Fun Flying on HJN. And for today, it's time that we get back into, well, by now you pretty much know what this means, right? So, let's get it going with the Seige 50. And this blaster, I tell you, being the second part of the so-called Hyper line. I'm never calling it the Hyper line because there did exist a Hyper line back in the early 2000s called the Hyper Sight line. So nothing much different happened there. So in the same way that this is basically just going to be called Hyper, excluding the Sight, they're hoping to make it different. But I don't see much of a difference there. So I've called it the Keen line. The Seige 50, on the other hand, though, happens to be a large hopper-fed blaster with these unique rounds, as you can see here. These Hyper rounds, as they've been signified as, are pretty much the same sort of construction as the rival HIR rounds. The only real difference is that they're mostly in a different color scheme. They're smaller than HIR rounds, so they can be easier to get lost at times. And of course, they're also more of a silicone rubber kind of feel, especially when you squish them. Feels more like silicone rubber as opposed to the kind of squishy foam that HIR rounds are made of, even to this day, because that line is still around even while this line is still going, believe it or not. So yeah, even after 2021 it carried on for a pretty long way. Pretty soon you'll be able to see the whole rest of the line possible. Yeah. These glasses tend to fog up really easily, as you can tell. I'll just keep it up like this for the most part. But anyways, what we got right here is, simply put, a shotgun style blaster with pump action, as you can see. And it can in fact chamber one round, which you can then use to fire at your unsuspecting victims. Wow. That definitely bounced around the room several times, so let's put in one more. There we go. Firing it at a big cushion up in front of me, just so these things don't bounce back as much as the first one did. I could see it landed right in front of me, but as you can basically see here, the pump is pretty much relatively smooth in terms of how it draws. It doesn't draw quite as far as a good amount of other pump blasters like the Twin Shock, Hades, and Ultra 3, so to speak. In any way that you look at it, though, a lot of people really dislike this line by any means as a way to market the usage of Rival being an obsolete part of the past, and as a way to supposedly kick the series down well enough so this series can advance. And as I've mentioned before, it is true that the Keen line did move after 2021, and they were able to add more blasters as the years went on. But the thing is that even now we're not quite seeing the potential for it, at least not as it should have been. This should have been a whole new series in its own right, and it probably could have had similar expectations as what the Rival series did, because after all, this thing took a few liberties straight out of the Rival line by having hopper-fed blasters, as well as its own sort of proprietary ammo. The Ultra series pretty much did the same thing, beginning in 2019 with the Ultra 1, but that was a really bad blaster. The only real difference between Ultra and Keen, though, is that, as you can see from up here, the Ultra 13, so to speak, is just one more recent example of how Ultra was able to get so much better as time went on. But for Keen, though, not quite as much. So, of course, the main problem with this is the fact that, well, it could be pretty dangerous. If you're not careful, there's times where you might end up forgetting to wear the glasses entirely, or they could break, pretty much. They're not necessarily Z87 quality because, yeah, I almost worry I could snap these things in half with just one move like that. And for the most part, it's not necessarily bad quality, at least for a free accessory that comes with the blasters. And, well, Speaking of free, though, I mean, the price tag would be another big thing out there to worry about. The Seige 50 here in America costed me 42 bucks. That's including a blaster, a sampling of 25 rounds. Yeah, it didn't come with 50 for any reason. They only included 25, but that's not really that big of a deal. You could just buy yourself a refill canister, get a 51 or 100 if you so choose to. And these tactical rails will actually serve as attachment points for these kits. These canisters that come with these rounds can actually be attached to the blasters themselves. It's not quite common to see attachments for large boxes or barrels or canisters of ammo that you can attach to a tactical rail, but still. The whole thing about it is that this lineup has in fact been marketed just so it could in fact overthrow the rival line. And in 2021, it proved to be nothing. And the fact is that Nerf actually did plan on completely ditching the rival series and destroying it, just so they can have this. But in 2022, less than a year later, we got ourselves the AccuRival series. So pretty much a combination between AccuStrike and Rival. Here we have ourselves the smallest blaster of the first three released in 2022, known as the Ares, which I got a video coming for this. But the main point is that that's exactly what happened. Nerf tried to overthrow its own line just so they can have something brand new. They tried to market it as something that's more adult friendly, but unfortunately it failed. Although more blasters had been produced, even after 2021. If I could name a few, then well, the Fuel, which has even less capacity than the Rush. So, it seems that as the years went on, the series did not necessarily improve by all accounts. So, do I recommend it? Not entirely. But it's time to set this thing onto safety with the safety switch. Overall, when discussing this exact blaster, it actually is not bad. I've seen a lot worse. I mean, a good majority of 2021 blasters have been pretty bad by all means, and some of which just happen to be better than others. The Ultra 13, as I've mentioned earlier, is one of those examples, but it's literally just a copycat of the Ultra 10, which came out just before it. Yeah, they're literally copycatting themselves. By copying the designs of their older blasters and putting them together into newer pieces, they can then have them resold. So, that's not to say that's the first time that it happened, but it's probably just something we're going to be seeing for a long time. And what's even worse is that 2021 showed to be the complete and total annihilation of a lot of lineups. Zombie Strike, Mega, Elite, even Modulus supposedly was in the dust. Yet, of course, how else did we get this? The Modulus Insurgent. This literally came out at the end of 2021, so... And don't worry, a video is on for this as well. Just so I can talk about it and all that good stuff, but, well, just knowing that 2021 was already a horrible year at what it was, just to know the fact that Nerf tried to completely destroy a great line like Rival by bringing this into the world, it really does put up a lot of questions. So, it's not a bad blaster, but the Seige 50 really needs a few tune-ups. So, if you want to make it optimal, a lot of changes are going to have to come down. But pretty soon, I'm going to have to talk about the other ones, and believe it or not, they're getting more expensive. So, there's just so much value on them nowadays, apparently, just because they're bad. But that's just the way of the world, it seems. But anyways, well, time to take these off for now. And if you want to see more, go down on my channel to make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.